pleased to have back here on the show a gentleman who I last spoke with during the summer. And now here we are a week before Thanksgiving in the middle of a college football season that is fraught with, as we know, quite a bit going on, and college basketball tipping off in a week. The commissioner of the SEC, Greg Sankey, back here on the Rich Eisen Show. How are you, Commissioner?
I'm well, Rich. I'm, taking it through day by day, right?
Yeah, I know. That's one of those, I guess, default ways to start a conversation, but it is infused with quite a bit these days. How much is your day filled up with COVID-19, Commissioner?
Yeah, pretty much. When you go back to when we last spoke, from that point into the start of football season, I was remarking to people everything we did was about COVID. We didn't do our normal preseason work like at my level. My staff took care of that with our campuses to make it work. And I looked at our deputy commissioner and said, we're not even talking about what are we doing with down markers or, the replay structure. Those things all have to be in place. And it's the same. I just left a phone call with John Calipari right before him with Bruce Pearl, and we're just talking about what's coming next week with the start of basketball season, not to mention the disruptions we had last week in football, one announced yesterday. AD call where we were on for almost 2 hours, and I'll bet you 75% of that content is driven out of the current environment.
So let's start with basketball, since you said you just got off the phone with both Calipari and Bruce Pearl. Look, at least you in the NFL and college football in the NFL are going at it. The first leagues, I guess, in a contact sport, going at it outside of a bubble. We saw the NBA had a bubble up. I have no idea. I'll be honest. How do you play college basketball in this environment, Commissioner? How do you do it?
Well, you take a step back. So we're going to have slimmed down crowds. It'll be a different atmosphere. We've learned that from the NFL, and I think Alan Sills, their chief medical officer, has said this. We've learned it as well. It's the eat, meet, and greet part. It's not the competition and the practice and the playing of games. It's what happens around the games, and so we've heightened our level of attention. I think later today we're making an announcement on these Connexon devices that were part of our learning from the NFL. I wear one every day here. It's a proximity tracker. We've used them in scrimmages in basketball with officials and players to figure out how much time are people spending near each other. We'll get into the space between benches. So we've learned, whether it's soccer, we're playing volleyball indoors right now and doing that in a healthy way. We have to be attentive to what happens outside of just the game. That will help us actually play the games. So
I guess front load what your announcement is. I wear one of those contact tracers, too, when I'm on campus at NFL Network. And I know that is very helpful when somebody does test positive, to figure out where they are and where they've been masked up and whether they're technically known as a close contact, so on and so forth. But how will that allow an uninterrupted college basketball season, in your estimation?
Well, it facilitates. It doesn't guarantee. And just like in football season, and I probably said this back in our prior conversation, there aren't any guarantees in this environment. You're going to have to be prepared for disruption. And we've learned that real life, that's happening. The elements of what we're doing includes testing. It includes the tracking devices. And what you learn is when that red light starts beeping, get away, right? That's part of the help in limiting contact tracing. And it's illustrative right now. If every healthy player in football in the SEC could actually play, and I'm talking about contact tracing, we'd be playing football without disruption. And so the learning experience is you have to adapt to the environment in order to facilitate healthy play. And it's not simply contact tracing. It's not simply fancy electronic devices. It's not simply testing. It is overall attention to going through a whole different operating approach so that you limit your exposure to people who may be positive outside your mini bubble on campus. And keep in mind, Rich, we're starting basketball at a time when our campuses will pretty much empty out because they're ending residential learning primarily for Thanksgiving. And so we've got 6 to 7 weeks to support non-conference and conference competition through these protocols. And we think we can do it in a healthy way. The challenge will be to actually do so.
Greg Sankey, Southeastern Commissioner, Conference Commissioner, SEC Commissioner, right here on the Rich Eisen Show. And again, I kind of hit this with you back in June in a facetious way, but we're all becoming best we can public health experts, even though we're not trained to do that. So I ask this next question to you in that light is, what are you hearing on the front lines, if you will, of the sports world about the vaccines that we're reading about and how that might somehow, some way change the outlook for a college basketball season to be done uninterrupted? And then maybe talking about the football season as we move on. What are you hearing about that, Commissioner?
Yeah, so that's where you and I are both suffering, right, from sudden expertism on public health issues.
Sudden expertism, I love
that. Because we're learning and we're reading, and we have been in communication with immunologists, infectious disease specialists, virologists, and I've always heard privately about the opportunity, once the calendar flips, for the vaccine to exist and to be effective. The issue will be distribution and its real efficacy in the public. And so our doctors have said, it's going to go to this is my interpretation, to healthcare workers, to frontline workers first. There's an orderliness to what's anticipated. I don't think that impacts basketball season from the standpoint of a vaccine, making sure everything's well. What I've said to our staff and to our campus leadership is we're going to be operating in this environment through the basketball season and in many ways probably through the academic year. And again, that's where I want to just qualify my sudden expertism that I'm not the public health official that determines this. We then talk about next year. So I've been asked about 21 football season, and I'm likely more optimistic about a return to, and I'll put air quotes around normal.
Right.
When we get into our next academic year, then believing we're going to have a whole different operating environment emerge in February or in March or in April. We're going to have to be dealing with these adjustments and virus sensitivities. I would anticipate through the academic year, but I'm not the one who actually knows and determines that. It's just my synthesis of all that I've heard.
Let's move to football then. Greg Sankey, SEC Commissioner here on the Rich Eisen Show. As you are aware, I'll just frame it for those who might not, that there were more canceled games this week or postponed games this week for the SEC than there were games that were actually played due to COVID-19. What is the status of your regular season and conference game on December 19th as it currently stands right now?
Yeah, we could still complete all 10 games for all 14 teams by December 19th. We had talked privately, and we've announced publicly that we'd use the 19th for rescheduling of games that don't involve teams in the championship game. We've got plans to do that. We announced one other disruption yesterday, really as an outcome of contact tracing involving Texas A&M. To go back a week, this is not like an outbreak. The reality is there's a set of circumstances, opt-outs early in the year, contact tracing. There have been positive tests, but that's a relatively small number. And so my statement earlier that if every healthy player was involved in playing, we wouldn't have had any disruption. But that's not our environment. So we're still focused on the finish line of December 19th. There's talk and probably some articles even today written about, do you adjust the college football playoff? Do you change dates? I'm one who thinks we need to have a finish line. I've finished 41 marathons in my life. One of those was mismeasured. That last half mile that was mismeasured way back in that one is a long part of a journey. And this has been a marathon for us, and so I'm focused on the 19th is that finish line for our conference schedule.
Understood that you wouldn't want to move a finish line, but as you know, the virus has its own say. Is there a deadline by which, a fail-safe point by which those New Year's 6 as well as the college football playoffs needs to be adjusted? And are we approaching that?
Well, certainly we're approaching it. I don't have in my own league an infinite opportunity to reschedule games. We made plans for disruption, and we're seeing that those plans were well informed. But it's not as if you can just keep rescheduling. I do think there has to be an end. I have not timelined out by when you'd have to decide an alteration at the end of the season. I'm literally like week to week right now. And so the emphasis is we're going through testing today. That informs decision making tomorrow, testing Thursday, decision making on Friday. We've got 6 games scheduled. The ability to play those guide us forward. I don't think you can just adjust with a week's limit if you're going to change dates. And that's why, Rich, I really focus on the 19th as our finish line. And we've made adjustments to tiebreaker policies and championship qualification policies that just acknowledge there may be disruption and we don't play every game.
And in a few minutes I have left with you, I'd like to focus on the college football playoffs. What is your stance as the commissioner of the SEC on conferences that won't play as many games as you, raising their hands and saying we want somebody with maybe 5 games, 6 games? Big Ten and Wisconsin leaves to mind because of COVID. They've only played twice. They've yet to play a team that's ranked. What would be your stance as the SEC commissioner about one of those teams saying they should get one of the 4 spots in the college football playoffs?
My stance is consistent with the selection criteria that's existed, which is we charge that selection committee with looking at the full scope of schedules. And we know back when the Big 12 did not have a championship game that the reference to every data point being very meaningful. And a league like ours playing 10 conference games in arguably the most rigorous conference schedule of all has great meaning. And if teams play fewer than that, that has to be taken in consideration. And if we're going all the way down to a team, having success with half as many games, the selection committee is going to have a responsibility to fully evaluate the total rigor of a 10-game conference schedule versus those who may be less. And that's an outcome of decision-making, and we were attentive to that as we made medical decisions and start date decisions and moving to a conference-only schedule, which has facilitated our ability to play, and others made those decisions, all of which have implications when we come down to the end of the season.
But taking a template that's been used in the past for right now might not really be operative, Commissioner, to be, to I guess, parry with you here on this front. And I've been pounding the table here about expanding the college football playoffs this year. I mean, baseball, as we know, expanded its playoffs. The NFL has a plan to expand its playoffs should cancellations bring that about. We saw what the NBA and the NHL did about its playoffs. Totally different because of the year. Why not expand your playoffs? Let more teams in this year and take the pressure off the committee in that regard, and also maybe give more football games to everybody. What about that idea?
Well, a few reasons. One is the more you add, when we're living it now, the more potential you have for disruption. We also have other postseason opportunities that remain important. We have the ability to conduct healthy competition, which we've demonstrated, but the more and more and more you add on, the more likely you are not to reach that finish line, which I referenced earlier. And there are limits on the number of games in which participants can play. So we have some teams that, by the time they play a championship game, will play 12 total college football games. Mm-hmm. Are we going to add more and more? Where are we going to do that? And when are we going to do that? Are all complexities that have guided us back, and I think in a well-informed way, to maintain the 14 playoff. That doesn't mean it's not debatable. That doesn't mean everyone agrees. But I'm of the view that gives us the best opportunity to still name a national champion, even though we know there's going to be plenty of debate around those decisions.
So basically it's going to be 4 teams, and if you can play it by the date that you can play it, that's it. There's not going to be any changes to anything else. Just get to that finish line the way that you've planned it.
Yeah,
that's basically it?
Yeah. Sure, that's clearly our direction now, but as I acknowledged earlier, you can see debate around those dates that will likely be introduced. We've had a prior conversation about the potential for expansion among the involved commissioners and Jack Swarbrick at Notre Dame is part of the management committee, and agreed that 4 provides us the best opportunity to name a national champion in this environment.
All right, last question for you. Have you had a conversation with Nick Saban to mask up? And if so, how did that go?
Actually, that one went well. I've had conversations with others that have not gone so well, and I view our head coaches as having the primary responsibilities to set the tone on this expectation. When we started our plans to play, there were certain expectations, one of which was masking. So, Gus Malzahn, Nick, I'm trying to run through the guys that have been at the top. We've even had some pretty good arguments between coaches. They've all been masked up, and where we've had deficiencies, believe me, we've noted it. I have staff, believe it or not, who never envisioned in their life Monday morning film review counting the number of times coaches show up with masks on. And I've had conversations like, hey, the guy in the green shirt who's signaling plays, I'm going to remove him from the sideline if he doesn't wear the mask. And then the next week it's the guy in the yellow shirt. So I'm not sure if they're trying to hide the guy based on shirt color, but we've made the expectation clear.
Wow.
Try to do it, objectively and fairly, knowing you can have slips, but that's part of the protocol we've adopted to facilitate healthy play.
Commissioner, really appreciate our chat. Again, I really always enjoy our conversations, and good luck completing these seasons, getting another one started, and let's chat down the road. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Nothing's easy in this environment, but appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, me too. That's the SEC Commissioner, Greg Sankey, here on the Rich Eisen Show. Tons of information there, including he's completed 41 marathons, which I would also drop casually in every conversation if I had that.
A big flex.
Wow.